she's very, very ill mentally, or she's been possessed by a demon. One of the two. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Reading in the Dark. My name is Byron, and I read sometimes. So, I am about to take you through the journey that is my wrap-up for everything I read in the months of September and October. And I'm going to do it before leaving for work in just a few minutes. So it's going to be fun for all of us. This, side note, is the coffee mug that I got while I was in DC. So these were good months of reading. I did not read a lot in September, which is why I just didn't do a wrap for that. I just posted my Halloween special or Halloween post-mortem thoughts on Halloween video, which I spent way too long editing. I'm going to plug it again at the end of this video because I have a feeling it's just too late for most people and no one's going to watch it. Please watch it. So the first book I finished in September, which I finished on September 5th, was Murder, She Wrote number 10, Murder in Moscow. This was a 4-star read for me. This one started out a little bit ridiculously. This is a situation where Jessica Fletcher is invited to Moscow as part of an artist exchange program, like a cultural exchange. So they want all of these American authors and Russian authors to meet and talk about their craft. They do it in DC and then they do it in Moscow. When they first get to Russia, there's some kind of hostage situation and Jessica takes the reins and walks into the line of fire to stop this person that she doesn't know. I wrote on my Goodreads review, these books are sort of comfort food for me. That's true. A European adventure, a little heavy-handed in the jingoism department. This is true. It's very, very American nationalist vibes going on. Like, well, at least in America we have things this way. And well, that's very nice, but in America. So it was very much a product of its time. It was written in 1998, I guess is when it was published. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was charming. Jessica Fletcher and her friends are always all of those things. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't awfully forgettable or anything like that. I do have fond memories of having read it. It did not change my life, and that's not what those books are for. The next book I finished was my first Stephen King of all time, Carrie. I don't know why I'm singing it. There was a musical based on Carrie, by the way. I read Carrie. I fucking did it. I fucking read a Stephen King novel. I'm proud of myself. Yes, it was the shortest one ever, but still, I read it. I gave it 5 stars. Carrie is the story of an oppressed teenager in high school whose mother is a mixed-up religious zealot. That is not a read on religion in general. This woman in particular is unwell. Margaret White. The book is told through mixed media. There's newspaper articles, police reports and whatnot scattered throughout. So you have multiple viewpoints and you've got multiple sources, which makes it really, really engaging and fun to read. I did not expect that, having seen the movie several times. I didn't realize that the book was written that way. It works really, really well because this event where she takes vengeance on the other kids at school, at the prom, is so unbelievable that getting multiple different people's perspectives on what they saw happen and what they think happened was a really, really cool way of telling that story. Loved it. Amazing. I gave it 5 stars. I've heard that later Stephen King books, his writing changes over time. I hope it changes in a good way because I really enjoyed Carrie. It was great. Recently we rewatched the remake of Carrie, which honestly I really like. I love the original and I like the remake. They both bring different things to the table. Julianne Moore is fabulous. So, Carrie, 5 stars. I then finished The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. A classic. I'm finally wiping something off of my shelf of shame. The Scarlet Letter tells the story of Hester Prynne, who has been shamed by her village for having committed the sin of adultery, and she is forced to wear a scarlet letter A badge on all of her garments so that she will always wear her shame. And there is a seedy backstory potentially involving one of the other people in the town. You also meet this reverend and this doctor who's caring for the religious figure. I think he was a reverend. The reverend is really well liked and young and charismatic, and he moves people with his sermons and everything. But his health is sort of declining, and he's keeping a secret that seems to be eating him up inside, and the doctor has his suspicions and is not really his friend but is posing as it, and the minister suspects him. of that, and Hester's just sort of carrying the burden of her punishment with grace, and things happen, and it was a beautiful book. There were passages that are hard to get through, difficult to parse just because the language is a little bit old-timey, but not most of it. Most of it was fine. A couple of times I did have to go back and reread something to be like, wait, what just happened? What are you saying? Just because of the language being very different. But for the most part, it was very readable. I recommend it if you have a little bit of patience for the writing, which I believe this was published originally in 2015, 1850. The edition that I read came out in 2015. Then I highly recommend it. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I think I would have been more engaged if it were more modern, but I really loved it. And I didn't get the exact ending that I wanted. I suppose if I had gotten that, maybe it would have been 5 stars, but honestly, be careful what you wish for. I could be wrong. So I will reread that one at some point. Scarlet Letter, great. 4 stars. That's a hot take. Scarlet Letter is a good book, you guys. I then read Murder, She Wrote, numbers 13 and 14. Knock 'em Dead and Trick or Treachery. Knock 'em Dead concerns murder and mayhem that take place in the sort of backstage goings-on of a Broadway play that's in rehearsals and has not yet opened. I suppose it was a fun book and a fun story, and of course I love all of these books, but because I make my living in a theater, there were just so many things that were like not quite correct and a little bit out of place that I was like, that's not really how that would work, and that's not how any of this goes. No one would do that. That's not allowed because XYZ. Things that are really probably not that important to the plot and wouldn't bother most people. Just like, it just kind of got under my skin because I'm like a theater person. So honestly, this book was probably just not for me. I did like it, and I think that if I were able to let go of my professional brain, it would have been more enjoyable, but I gave it 3 stars. I then read the greatest Murder, She Wrote book of all time, yet. Number 14, Trick or Treachery. It's Halloween in Cabot Cove, and there's a charlatan in town telling people about this curse, the arrival of a self-righteous fire and brimstone spiritual medium. Has people on the lookout for curses and evil omens. This is true. There's also a reclusive, mysterious woman. Someone's child decides to go into her house and bake cookies with her. It's totally innocuous and innocent, but they get all freaked out by her, and the townspeople don't like her, and someone ends up murdered. It's her. And Jessica has to solve it. There's also this really lavish Halloween party at this big wealthy guy's house. So that setting was really fun. I enjoyed the depiction of that party. And of course, all of the investigations and goings-on that went on after that. Jessica always goes back and forth and goes back to re-interview people that she already talked to while kind of pretending to keep her distance from the case so that the sheriff doesn't think that she's honing in on his territory or whatever. Although by this point, her relationship with Sheriff Metzger is good enough, and they're good enough friends that he sort of welcomes her input. So if you've ever seen the show, it's kind of the same dynamic. And this one is set at Halloween. I liked the mystery. I liked the reveal and how the investigation progressed. So it just gave me all of the feels that I needed. It hit all the right notes, and I just loved it. So I gave it 5 stars. Now, I suppose it might be seen as somewhat ridiculous that I gave a Murder, She Wrote tie-in novel 5 stars and The Scarlet Letter 4. But I am not a professional book reviewer. These are just my impressions. This is how I experienced the book, my experience of this book. I enjoyed this book at a 5-star level, and I enjoyed The Scarlet Letter at a 4-star level. The last book I finished was another 5-star, and another classic, The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. There's not much that needs to be said. The Exorcist tells the story of a young girl who's the daughter of a famous American actress who is there in a rental home in Georgetown. She's filming a movie in DC with this hilarious, drunken director friend of hers. She's at a sort of turning point in her career. She wants to go into directing, and then meanwhile her daughter starts acting very strangely. None of the doctors know what's going on, and they do test after test after test. And eventually the daughter, Regan is her name, Regan, who was playing with a Ouija board, not saying, just saying, and is also dealing with some trauma and pain because of her parents' separation. The actress, her mother, Chris McNeil, is separated, I believe, from her husband, Howard, who is overseas somewhere doing something, just being a deadbeat dad, essentially. And he doesn't call her on her birthday, and there's all of this underlying like pain, but for the most part she's a happy, healthy daughter. And then her behavior gets crazier and crazier, and it starts to seem very much like she's very, very ill mentally, or she's been possessed by a demon. One of the two. So at one point, because there is a Jesuit housing facility just down the street, and she has a house party where a few of the priests in the area are invited. She sees this priest, this Father Karras, Damien Karras, many, many times. So she ends up seeking the help of this priest. And she eventually says, I think we need an exorcist. And he's like, you can't really get an exorcist. They don't do that anymore. But he starts to try and debunk the concept that her daughter could be possessed and can't really do it. And they end up having to call in a real exorcist and have an exorcism. So yes, it's a horror film, very famous horror film, nominated for a slew of Academy Awards in 1973. But it's not just scary. This book is beautiful. The way it depicts people's faith, their crisis of faith, the sort of interplay between cynicism and faith, and the multiple perspectives. You read from Father Karras's perspective, you read from Father Marin's perspective, he's the exorcist, and from Chris McNeil's perspective, and from this detective, Kinderman, who is an unforgettable character, so charming, who is investigating a murder. I'll just say no more. They're all depicted very differently. They're so fleshed out, and they're such real people. It's such a beautiful book, and reading some of the passages from Father Karras, where he's suffering with a crisis of faith and everything, you just have so much empathy, and the way he sees a sunset over the Potomac River is just so beautiful. Honestly, it's such a beautiful book. It could be about anything, and I still would have loved it. It happens to be about an exorcism and be horrifying. Trigger warning, if you are deeply religious, there's a lot of imagery in this that is extremely disturbing. It describes Black Mass, because the people are having a conversation about it. There's desecrations of religious icons in churches nearby and stuff, and so everybody's kind of on edge. It's very dark. It goes to places that you're like, oh God, I didn't expect that I would ever hear those words together in one sentence. But overall, just a fabulous book. The audiobook, which I experienced, read by the author William Peter Blatty, top notch. One of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. He's a great actor. All of the characters, he does that brilliant thing where, like, just because you're a man and you're doing the voice of a female character or a younger character, yes, his voice gets a little higher, but it doesn't feel like he's like, I'm playing a little girl now. He just becomes that mental and emotional identity, and it reads, and he doesn't need to like do silly things with his voice. He's just a very good actor, and he does a really great job with the narration. The book is beautiful. I just loved it so much more than I even expected to, and I gave it 5 stars, 5 enthusiastic stars. I really want to read it with my eyes next at some point, because I loved it so much. I'm currently listening to the audiobook of Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. That's a Poirot, I think that's how you say it, mystery. Not a Marple mystery, so that's new for me. Really enjoying it. It's read by Hugh Fraser, and I think I'm going to pick up We Have Always Lived in the Castle next. So that's probably what I'm going to pick up next, and I'm going to continue listening to the Halloween Party. In fact, that's what I'm going to do right now, because I am late for work. I have to have left 2 minutes ago to make it on time. So I'm going to leave now and go to work. I am not going to speed. I'm going to drive safely. And I'm going to listen to Halloween Party by Agatha Christie while I drive and edit this later. Also, my hair. It's gone. That's your hair update. And I've got red marks on my head because of the hat that I'm wearing. So that's this video. I really have to go. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them in the comment box below, unless you're just there to be an asshole, in which case, you know, fuck off. And until next time, I will be here in the dark reading. Goodbye. I have to go.